Hello, guys, and welcome to a brand new episode of Crooked Illness. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode today. As you guys can see from the title, we are going to be getting into conquering problems of the body and mind. Joining me in this conversation today is my guest, Debbie Emick. Debbie approached me to be a guest, and I'm so glad she did because she shared an incredible story with me of being a survivor of multiple chronic illnesses and autoimmune disease. She is also the author of The Other Side of Perfect, Discovering the Mind-Body Connection to Healing Chronic Illness. I'm excited to have Debbie here to chat with me about this topic today, share her story with us all, and offer some incredible insights. So without further ado, welcome Debbie to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Paris. It is my pleasure completely to be here. I'm so grateful for the chance to talk to you.
Thank you. I'm so excited to have you here today to dive into this because, like I mentioned, you shared such an awesome story with me, and I'm so excited to feature that. So before we get right into that, I would love if you could share with us a little background on you and your story.
Sure. So about 10 years ago, I started navigating the process of autoimmune disease diagnosis. Going through that, I was a teacher. I had been a classroom teacher for about 14 years and started having some severe symptoms that I couldn't ignore any longer after having my daughter about a year prior. And so just started going through those waters. Anyone who knows has been diagnosed with autoimmune disease or has some chronic illnesses, that is a long and winding road, and usually one diagnosis leads to multiple diagnoses. So through the course of that, just working on controlling what I could to try to heal my body. And so I focused on nutrition and then on exercise and then on sort of eliminating some toxicity in, the chemicals I use, the products I use around my house and on my body, put into my body, worked on adding some good supplements. And finally, after a conversation with one of my doctors, decided to try leaving my job to eliminate stress, and thinking that would be like the magic bullet that would solve all my problems and I would get better and heal. And it wasn't until after that that I found myself in my deepest, darkest place. And so, the book and the healing after that is sort of my way of clawing myself out of that dark place and never wanting to go back. And it just so happened that working on my mental and emotional health also helped physically heal my body and eliminate some of the pain that I was feeling so often. So
Wow. I just think that's incredible and probably the most amazing thing that you brought up right there. And then also in our previous conversation is the magic bullet idea of kind of searching for that, right? And like you said, you already mentioned, changing your diet, changing your exercise, and adding in different things, taking out different things that were toxic, doing all of these things that you think, okay, if I do this, it'll be good. Everything's going to be great.
Mhm.
All right, didn't work. We'll try this. And it's almost like, searching for this one magic thing that's going to bring about all these solutions and just make everything better. But that really wasn't the case. And I think that's so interesting that you bring that up, because I feel like there's probably a lot of people who do that, who search for that and say, okay, this is the problem, I'm going to fix that, then it's all going to be good. But what was your experience like with the search you embarked upon looking for that magic bullet? What was that like?
Yeah, so now in retrospect, I can see each one as sort of like peeling a layer that I had, maybe surrounded myself in. Food was the most obvious one, though my medical doctors to that point hadn't even suggested I work on food. But I was feeling so sick. I had like 9 prescription medications I was taking every day, 3 times a day, that I really just subsisted on Hershey's bars and Diet Pepsi. And so at that point, my husband was like, dude, you got to do something about this. It's going to help at least. And so yeah, I worked on my food first, thinking like, oh, this is it, this will solve all my problems, right? And then I would just step to the next one, try the next one, thinking this will solve all my problems, this will solve all my problems, until eventually it was like, man, I tried everything I knew to try. And looking back now, those were all superficial things, right? Like, they may not be easy for everyone to work on, but they're pretty simple. Eliminate foods that create inflammation or that you're allergic to, or that you just know there's no nutrient density in. That's pretty simple. It may not be easy to do. And so what happened is I went through those steps. Um, I unconsciously at that point didn't realize that some coping mechanisms, some ways of living that I had attached to because of some repressed emotions and trauma from my childhood were perfectionism and people pleasing. And so working on my diet and my exercise and those things just allowed me to like ramp up that perfectionism, ramp up the people pleasing, so that I was like really over controlling my food. And when it all was said and done, almost like exercising to a punishing amount, where it was, I just kept using those as more layers of perfectionism or people pleasing. um
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's crazy because the fact that you were doing these things, right, that you thought would help make things better, eliminate certain issues. So you worked with the food, the
Mhm.
exercise, and then that turned into another thing, right, that we were having to deal with, this perfectionism and doing these things and saying, okay, well, I'm feeling better. I'm looking better. I'm going to keep doing this, and then having that become an issue. And then I think is so interesting because it's almost like, you're trying all these things that we hear about all the time. When every time you turn the TV on or like go online, try this diet, do this workout routine, try these different things, and you were doing all of these things, which are great, but then leading to more issues and more stuff with like the perfectionism aspect. And I think that's such an important point because that's what we talked about, and we got into this conversation last time on this topic, right, on perfectionism and how that's tied into the whole thing and the relationship it has. So I would love if you could talk about, what was this like, and why do you think so many people, struggle with this? Or what do you think so many why do you think so many people have different issues that might be somehow rooted in perfectionism?
Sure. So I think that's a much deeper question than maybe it appears outwardly, right? A
Yes.
reason I had used perfectionism was it was almost like my addiction, right? So I had some trauma from my childhood that I had never really dealt with, just superficially, like I'm a positive person and I'm forgiving, forgive and move on and put a smile on and just go on with your life. And that I definitely had tried some other things that maybe some people might get addicted to that are not socially acceptable, but those made me feel out of control. Perfectionism and people playing, people like that, right? That's the whole thing, that's the whole point. I thought I was perfect, but I could control people, I could keep them at an arm's length, like unconsciously, right? Not some conscious thing I was doing, but it was a way of controlling my environment that didn't make me feel out of control like other addictions. And then what happens is people like that, people support that, and that just sort of feeds that. So the longer time goes on, the more refined that gets and the more unconscious I think you become to that behavior. And it wasn't until there was something, this moment where I didn't really play out like uh, any sort of suicide, but I definitely had thoughts that were like, it would be much better if I had an illness that took me quickly rather than this one that's going to be long and drawn out. Um, and so from the other side of that, I could see like how deep and dark that was. And then I was able to start examining my life a little bit deeper. But I it wasn't until I saw like, whoa, that got really low. And I don't want to get that low again, because I knew I have two daughters and I didn't want to perpetuate whatever cycle had created this in me. I wanted to be able to break that cycle for them. I couldn't really find the worthiness in myself at the time. So, yeah, it was really just that dark moment that was able to begin making me conscious of this. But I would call it um, an addiction. It's the same type of behavior, definitely a coping mechanism, a way of keeping people away, rather than letting them in and seeing the real me.
Wow. I think the most interesting part about that was the aspect of control that you brought up, of feeling like you were losing control in these other areas. So having that as a way of having some control. So you're not feeling so completely out of control in all these areas and all these different things that you're dealing with the illnesses and with the autoimmune disease, and having something that you can control, or just feel like you have a say in what's going on, I think is
Mhm.
the piece, because that's kind of what I take away from that. When I used to like really like people pleasing, perfectionism, like looking back at like, ways I used to be, and like really trying to examine that and say, why was it like that? And it boiled when you boil it down. I feel like it could be different for everybody, but from at least what I'm taking away from you and your story and your experience is that aspect of control.
Mhm.
And I just think that's such an interesting part to bring up, because I didn't think that was going to be part of our conversation at all when we got into this. I thought we were going to focus on, your story with the chronic illnesses and the autoimmune disease and what that was like and how you overcame that and what you learned from those experiences. But I thought it was so helpful that you tied that piece in there, because that's just, like you said, another layer that
Mhm.
you were peeling back from that experience and really discovering and diving deeper into and gaining more of an understanding of why that was there and why that was going on and where is this people pleasing coming from and all these different things. So I think that's an awesome point that you just got into right there. But another thing that I would love you to talk to me about is the mind body connection and the role that that played for you when it came to healing.
Yeah, so it's all related, right? The perfectionism, the people pleasing, and then these things that happened in my childhood that I never dealt with are really the foundation of why I developed that personality, essentially, or those coping mechanisms. And all of these other things that are not bad. So I'm not trying to say like working on the food you're eating and making sure it's nutritious and actually serves your body. That's great. Getting your heart rate up and moving your body and loving your body. That's great. That's important. All of those things are really important. But I could never really get to the heart of healing if I didn't get to the heart of these things that were going on with me mentally and emotionally. And so there were a few things that were going on at the same time, right? I had quit my job. I was feeling low. I was feeling without purpose. And so trying to go through that and come out of that, I was reading a lot. I was trying to learn to develop worthiness and self-love and also heal the physical pain that was going on in my body. And so I was reading from authors like Brene Brown, Glennon Doyle, and and so they through that I started working on shame and recognizing this perfectionism, people pleasing behavior pattern. Um, and at the same time, I was still working on physically healing my body. So I went to someone in my area. I live in a really rural area of Colorado. And so she's called a chiropractor. That's like an accessible term where we live, but she does a lot more than that. She might be called a healer somewhere else. So I went to her and I just wanted probiotics. Like I wanted to work on healing my digestive system, thinking that would heal my body. Which again, there's a big, strong connection there. A lot of research to prove that. But she kind of saw through that. And she did help me find a probiotic and work on like healing leaky gut. But she also did some somatic work with me. So she saw past this like superficial layer. And she's the one who kind of opened up that connection between my past and the physical pain I was feeling in my body. So when she first started doing that, it was really uncomfortable. I didn't like it. I didn't want to go there. And so I went out sort of looking for skeptics, right? Like I asked my husband, I asked a good friend, I was like, this is crazy, right? I shouldn't be doing this. Like, what is this? And they were both like, hey, you've tried everything else. Like, what would it hurt? Why not try it? So I kept going back and working with her. And I did start to feel some of the physical pain that I was holding in my body decrease, and eventually parts of it just leave altogether. And so I was able to make this real connection between I'm never going to be able to physically heal if I don't mentally and emotionally heal. And for me, that meant sort of resurrecting these things from my past that I had never dealt with. And then luckily for me, I also started discovering writers like Bessel van der Kolk, a doctor who wrote When the Body Keeps the Score, and Gabor Mate, who wrote When the Body Says No. And both of those books show this real connection between our nervous system, putting our nervous system in fight or flight mode. Various traumas could do that, or just the way that we live in this busy, like fast-paced world. And the chemical and hormonal reactions those create in our body that long-term causes disease and illness, right? Heart disease, lung disease, those kinds of things. And so I was just using my intuition, taking the next step one at a time, and having all of these things sort of present themselves to me at the right time. And that gave me permission to work on my mental, emotional health, to heal my body physically. And it just happened to actually really help with physical pain.
Wow, would you probably say that that was the most helpful piece? Because I think, you know, hearing all the things that you tried and all the different things that you tried out, that you were trying to practice daily, eliminate different toxic habits and things like that. But I feel like, you know, when you bring up the unresolved traumas and also the books you're reading about how your body keeps a score and kind of your body remembers those things, but when you never deal with them, I feel like the most powerful part from what you just said is how uncomfortable you were in the beginning when you're the practitioner you were seeing was bringing up this stuff and trying to work through this with you, of course,
Mhm.
because I feel like that's, you know, at least from my own experience, I can say that's how I felt, you know, with bringing up different trauma. You feel uncomfortable. Sometimes you don't want to go there. You don't feel like you're ready. And I feel like part of the thing too that might be an issue is just feeling like you won't ever be ready. And then eventually
Yeah.
convincing yourself, right, that you can't talk about this. You just need to, you know, push through it, keep trying
Mhm.
different things. And that's what you were doing, you know, doing all these different things, nutrition, exercise, doing all these things that you were doing on a daily basis, but then not really, like you said, not really resolving that underlying trauma, but also not wanting to go there. So I feel like,
Mhm.
you know, I'd love to ask you, do you think that was probably one of the most helpful things that you tried in really discovering this mind body connection and really being able to write the book that you wrote and work on that and do that? And was that the most helpful piece, healing these unresolved traumas?
Yeah, I would say for me that really, I couldn't find healing without doing that. But now I'm able to use that to make a practice out of all of those other things that are much more about loving myself and my body than were before, about like perfecting and pleasing others. So, you know, part of the healing is finding a worthiness in myself, loving myself, for lack of a better term. I know that's so overused right now, but um loving myself enough to do this work for me and take care of it for me. So at first I just had to do it for my daughters because I did not ever want to see them in this place I found myself in. But yeah, now I'm able to use food to love myself and love my body, right? I'm able to use movement and exercise to love myself and love my body as like an active meditation, or because I care about myself, I do it. I don't punish myself with it. Um, and I meditate and journal. And so that was a big part of healing, like you're saying. That was really important. And that was the first step to writing the book. There's a lot of evidence that just journaling for 20 minutes a day for a certain amount of time, not forever, not for the rest of your life, can do as much as therapy. So there's a reason I hadn't worked on it, right? I didn't want to go there. I didn't want to deal with it. That was the last thing I tried. But for me, I couldn't have healed without that. And I don't know now, you can't say where I would have been had I not actually dealt with that, but I can only imagine. You know, it was pretty deep and dark. And had I not gone there and actually dealt with the things I didn't want to deal with, I don't know where I'd be now, but I don't think it would be a good place. So doing that helps me also do all the other things that take care of my body, that allow my body to heal, have a healthy immune system in a healthy way that supports me. Does that answer
Wow.
your question?
Yes, that is perfect. I love it. I love all of it. And the fact that you were able to go there, like you said, feeling in the beginning very uncomfortable, don't want to dive into this stuff, don't even want to bring it up. But I think the fact that you were able to do that and you did do that and you accomplished it is just, like you said, you don't know where you would have been if you hadn't done it. You can only imagine where you would have been. And I think that's very, huge to just have that ability to do that, because it definitely is difficult and it definitely isn't something that's easy. It is challenging, but the results of being able to work through that, like you said, are so evident through, the conversation we had, and then also the messages in your book, which I want to get into as well. I know we had one more question, but I'll ask you that, then I'll ask you about the book, because I really want to like dive into that as well, because that's just amazing to me that you put the work in and used your story to transform that into a piece of something that people can access and get into. So I'm going to ask you about that too. But before we do that, I just wanted to ask you, what has been the most impactful lesson you have learned so far, either from the lowest moment you have experienced or the best moment?
That's a big question, Paris. So I think I'll just get real basic with it, right? The biggest lesson is about becoming conscious of these patterns and routines, both behavioral and also just the self-talk, the stories I was telling myself, what I was saying to myself. And so I think the biggest lesson is just awareness. We can't change anything unless we become aware of it, right? I think it's Carl Jung who said, um, until we make the unconscious conscious, um, we'll like develop our lives around it, and we'll call it fate or something. I know I'm butchering that, but it's like,
I know what you're trying to do. I
yeah,
feel like I do that a lot with quotes too, but I totally get your point.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that to me, that's step one. That's it. Like, just become aware, just be the observer of your behavior patterns, the talk that is going on in your mind, without judging it. Just become aware, and then learn to detach from it, right? So I know now that I am not my body. I am not my illness. I am not my pain. Just the same way that I am not my house. I am not my car. I am not my job. None of those things are me. I existed before all of those things, and I still exist. Somewhere the soul of me is beneath all of that. And so I am also not that voice in my head that's telling me all these mean things or untrue things or shoulding all over me, all of that, right? So I would say those are the lessons I still use every day. Just be aware, without judgment, and then detach from whatever that story is that's going on.
Awareness and detachment. I love it. Love that. Those lessons, those are huge. And of course, those can take time to learn and to get there. But like you said, once you're able to do that and to have that, it's just so incredible, just with the way the quality of your life improves as a result of that, I think is so impactful and important. But the last thing I want to talk to you about before we end this episode here is your book, The Other Side of Perfect: Discovering the Mind Body Connection to Healing Chronic Illness. So tell me, what was, I can probably imagine, but I want to hear it from you. What was the inspiration, and what was it like, the first idea that popped into your head of wanting to write this book? What was that moment like?
Yeah, so I have to say at first it was just no pressure. It was just the thought of, if all I get from this is, say, like a journaling exercise that helps me heal, then it's worth it. But then it became a practice that helped me also create boundaries, uh, develop as a person, continue to heal. And it turned into like a love letter to my younger self. If I could read it before I went down any of these roads, hopefully it would help me heal. And then maybe a message to little sister, or hopefully helping someone along the way before they get here. And so it's everything we've been talking about. It goes back into my childhood, brings up some of the things that I never wanted to address or deal with, and then walks the reader through all these different layers I peeled to heal, and where I'm at today and what that looks like today. And as I wrote it and went along, I also created some journal prompts after some of the chapters to hopefully help the reader do their own healing as they come along with me through the book. And from that came like a 30-day companion journal that goes along with it for anyone that wants to do their own healing as well.
Wow. I think that's so awesome that you included, in the book, the journal prompts for people to really be able to, write out their feelings or what they think or what they're going through and really walk through your story with you. That's so cool. And, I was so excited, even when we talked that one day on the phone, I was like, I am excited to hear this lady's story. I know it's going to be so amazing. And just the fact that you did this and I think that's awesome. Just the vulnerability component of that, because it takes a lot to put your story out there and to put these moments out there that you never wanted to get into at one point in your life, but doing that and realizing how powerful that has been for you and how much that has helped you and how much that can potentially help other people, if they can read that and relate to certain aspects of your story and really feel a connection there and say, you know what, maybe I can get through whatever it is that I've dealt with or I've been dealing with, because this lady did, she wrote a
Mm,
book, she did this, so maybe I can do that. And I really love that, just that whole aspect of really restoring hope in people and just having something to check out that is real. Like, you live
mm,
this is your life, your experiences, and what they have done to shape you into who you are. And that's really what I love about people the most who come on here, is just hearing their like lowest moments and like, what did that do to you, what did you learn from that, and like how did that help transform you into the way you are now, into how you think now, into how you just, all of it, I think, is so incredible. So, I'm excited, for this episode. I'm excited for the book. I'm excited about you. I'm excited about all of it.
uh,
So yeah,
well,
so
thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's it. That's like the greatest hope, right? That our struggle could help someone else. And that's all part of the healing. Like, there is no healing if you're still holding shame. So I can't really heal if I don't expose the real me and become vulnerable. And hopefully that helps other people, but it definitely helps me. So thank you for all your generosity and kindness. I really appreciate
yes,
it.
of course. Thank you. And thank you to everyone who is listening today, or if it's nighttime, daytime, whatever time you guys are tuning into this, you got to hear Debbie's story today, which was so powerful and so many awesome tips and things that she has shared with us today. I'm so excited about that. So I just want to say goodbye to you guys, and also goodbye to Debbie. Bye.
Bye, Paris.